Hey all, today we're going to go over how to bleach sapwood on a piece of live edge lumber. So I recently delivered a console table, and after receipt the customer really wanted a little bit more contrast between the sapwood and the heartwood of this piece of wood. This piece is specifically black walnut, and so to give them a little bit more contrast and really make that heartwood pop, we're going to try to bleach the sapwood a little bit, bring a little bit of lightness to that wood, which should help give it much better contrast and be more along the lines of what the customer is looking for. You can see here in this drawer front that there's quite a lot of contrast between the sapwood and the heartwood, and that's more along the lines of what the customer is looking for versus what you see here on the bottom in the top of the console table that we delivered. There's a little bit of contrast between that heartwood and sapwood, but due to oxidation from time and nutrients that had gone through the tree and also sunlight over time, the sapwood itself didn't really come out with nearly as much lightness as you might see in other cuts of walnut. To bleach the wood, we're going to use this 2-part bleach product from Zinsser, a name you might recognize from their production line of shellacs. And it's important to note that this is not your standard household bleach. This is a 2-part industrial bleach solution. I believe the ingredients are sodium hydroxide and hydrogen peroxide. So we will apply the part A, let it sit, and then apply the part B while the wood is still wet. That'll be a 2-part chemical reaction that in turn lightens up that sapwood. There's a few other videos out there that will show you this process of how to bleach wood and how to bleach the sapwood. I didn't find them particularly valuable walking me through how to do it, at least in regards to my specific project. So hopefully, as you follow along, you can get some value from this particular video. Real quick, a couple quick things I forgot to mention. For one, we're going to be applying the bleach solution using an air sprayer. This should give us a little bit more ability to kind of feather the bleach into the heartwood rather than potentially getting a pretty stark line if we were to brush or wipe it on. I did do some samples with a wipe, and it wasn't terribly, there wasn't a real hard line between the sap and heartwoods, but I'd really like to make sure I avoid that on the finished piece. So we're going to try airbrushing it. Number two, because we are airbrushing it, that is going to aerosolize some of the bleach, some of the chemical. Therefore, we're definitely going to be wearing a respirator, which I think you should probably use anyways, even if you were brushing and applying by hand. And we're also going to be wearing gloves.
So we're going to start by applying part A, and you can always add more material into your, more of the part A solution into your HVLP sprayer. So we're just going to start off with, I don't know, maybe about an ounce in there, see how it goes out, and add more if we need to.
The instructions here state two kind of contradictory things. They say that you should only apply the part B to a wet, with a wood that's been wetted with the part A. Kind of complicated here in Colorado where the air is so dry. So, well, I guess the other complication is that you're supposed to wait 10 minutes for the part A to soak in. So yeah, that's kind of complicated by the fact that it's so dry. I'm going to hopefully get 10 minutes of set time out of this, but as soon as we start getting, even right here, it's starting to look a little bit dry, and it's only been 2 minutes. Once we start getting close to 10 minutes, if it's starting to look dry, I'm just gonna start pouring or start applying that part B.
It's only been 7 minutes, but we're starting to get pretty dry, so I'm going to go ahead and start applying part B here.
After just that first coat, you can already see that the edge is starting to get a little bit lighter, a lot more red. And that's kind of what we saw on the sample pieces that I did. The first 2 coats really brought out a lot of red in the sapwood, or rather I should say, it lightened the sapwood to the point that the red showed through a lot more. And after 3 coats on the samples, that red started to fade away. So we'll see what this looks like after it sits for a little while. Realistically, I'll probably let it sit for about 6 hours, let the chemical reaction take place, and then I'll start reapplying as I need to get to the really light color that we want. This is about a half an hour after application of the Part B, and you can definitely see we've got some really light sapwood there. As I did mention, there are still quite a bit of red coming through, especially down here at this end. There's a good pocket of red there, a lot of red coming through the sapwood there. So we will do a second application. I'll probably go light in some of these areas that are already pretty light, just so they don't turn completely bleached white. But after second application, hopefully we'll see that red tone down. Might still need a third in some parts of that, but definitely lightening up. One thing you want to keep in mind is to always be spraying away from you towards the edge of the piece. So here you can see I kind of had a little bit of the liquid pooling on the surface. It hadn't quite soaked in yet by the time I had sprayed it. And because of that, the pressure from the spray gun and the additional material being sprayed out forced the pooled liquid to disperse over the top of the surface into the heartwood where I obviously don't want it. So this piece is going to have to go back through the drum sander and potentially start over again. So don't do that. After what I think is 4 coats now, I've reached the point of diminishing returns, where I've saturated some of the areas that still have some color in them. You can see some here on the edges, some of the edges here, and there's a big old patch down here with some red showing through. I've reapplied fairly heavy in those spots, but have not really seen any lightness in that color or disappearance of that red color. So we're gonna call it quits here. And another thing you'll notice also is the buildup of some residue on the sides of your piece where the fluid may have blown off using the spray gun. For me, because this is a refinish job, the sides are already coated with with oil-based poly. So this has wiped off pretty easily with just a piece of wet cloth. If it was raw wood, I do not know how easily that would come off. At this point though, we're going to follow the directions on the box, which calls for neutralizing the surface with a mix of, I believe it's 2 parts water to 1 part vinegar. So we're just going to mist that onto the areas that we bleached. Now this definitely will raise the grain of the wood, which we already did by bleaching it. Now to start off, this was only sanded. I did sand this to 120. I didn't want to go too much higher than that because I wasn't sure how much of the grain would be raised. I definitely wanted to at least get to 120 so that I wouldn't be removing too much material and going back down to the base color. So we'll let that sit to neutralize. We will probably do a second application just to be sure because of just the sheer volume of the bleach material that I applied with the four coats there. And once we've done that, we will sand to our and apply a finish. This is the final product. Quick recap of where we started. This is the back side of the wood, the original coloration. You can see how it's fairly dark from sapwood transitioning into heartwood right around there, continuing up, and again the transition there. And this is the result. Quite a stark difference. We added, I want to say 4 or 5 applications of the bleach. Realistically though, the color pretty much stopped changing, pretty much stopped lightening up after the 3rd application. So I will, my recommendation would be to stop at 3. There's really not much value added after that. Then, so this was sanded to 120 grit. I applied the bleach, then neutralized it with the vinegar and water solution, sanded at 150 and 220, and now it is ready for finishing. So that's bleaching sapwood on a piece of live edge walnut. Hopefully you found this video valuable. Hopefully there was some new information that might have been presented that might not have been available or might not have been clear in some other videos. If this was helpful, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you guys later.